Hello, everyone. This is Maryna Hritsyshyna, and I want to welcome you to the next episode of the podcast Clean Energy Talks. Today, we will talk about bringing hydrogen to the EU market with Joris Vlasblom. Joris is an experienced energy advisor specializing in hydrogen, renewable energy, and sustainable aviation fuels. With deep expertise in energy strategy, project management, and regulatory landscape, he helps organizations navigate the energy transition and develop innovative, sustainable energy solutions. Joris, thank you for your participation in this podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure being here and having this chance to talk to you in this format. And yeah, looking forward to it.
So I know that you have a lot of experience with projects connected with bringing all the hydrogen derivatives at the EU market. I think most of project we start from discussion of the EU hydrogen targets and demand. From your experience, how do you assess the current demand for hydrogen and its derivatives, and whether this demand is aligned with targets for 2030 and beyond?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and one that many people are struggling with. And there's a couple aspects to it. First of all, everybody thinks hydrogen is something of the future, but really it's not. There is already a huge hydrogen demand in Europe and also globally in mostly in the chemical industry or the petrochemical industry, in refining, in ammonia production for fertilizers, etc. So in many industries, hydrogen is already being used. The only caveat is that most of this, if not over 90% of this, is gray hydrogen, which of course comes with a large carbon footprint in the production through steam methane reforming, etc. And that's really what we want to tackle, right? If we zoom out a bit, the reason we're talking about hydrogen is because we want to decarbonize or defossilize. We want to mitigate climate change. And that's why we're talking about increasing the demand for green hydrogen, or if you use the European terminology, RFNBO hydrogen. And there, the story is quite different, because where we see a very large demand already for gray hydrogen, there isn't really a huge demand yet for RFNBO hydrogen in Europe, mostly because a lot of the targets will come into play further down the road towards 2030. So that creates this bit of mismatch where the hydrogen demand or the RFNBO hydrogen demand that we expect is almost this step function that suddenly kicks in at 2030. So from that regard, there is a huge hydrogen demand, but it's not really aligned with the targets in 2030 just yet.
From my side, I think it's important to mention also targets for transport sector, for aviation and maritime. These targets may be in some way different from Renewable Energy Directive, but still we should take into account that these targets are mentioned beyond the 2030, and in some cases they have some clarity about demand, at least for aviation, for instance. Except demand, I think the most important question is the market entry and readiness. And I think we have a lot of challenges regarding the new market for hydrogen. What do you think? What are the main biggest challenges to bring hydrogen into the market in the EU?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I see now is uncertainty. And that comes in many forms. It's uncertainty about the demand that we just talked about, how much RFNBO hydrogen will be demanded in 2030. That's something that I think a lot of developers are struggling with. Um, then there is, and that sort of ties into uncertainty regarding regulation. We just talked about the the Renewable Energy Directive, but also Refuel Aviation, Fuel Maritime, and also, of course, all the international organizations like IMO, IATA, all of these, or sorry, ICAO, I should say, all of these, yeah, instruments create a demand. But it's tough to estimate how much that demand will be. And it's also tough to estimate how that demand will be met. Where are the projects going to go? Is it all going to be produced locally, or is there going to be a lot of international trade? So I think that's a big uncertainty is on the demand side, and that ties in very well to another big uncertainty, which is willingness to pay. How much are their clients or their potential off-takers willing to pay for RFNBO hydrogen or RFNBO ammonia, etc.? That is something I think a lot of the developers are in the dark about, and yeah, they can't rely on the markets that are already there, because if you compare, for instance, ammonia, gray ammonia and RFNBO ammonia will come at a very different price tag, and that creates a lot of uncertainty for these developers. If they need to sell their green hydrogen at the price of gray, then they are never going to be able to yeah, to fund their projects and to make them bankable. So I think that's if I had to tie it all into one word, it's uncertainty. And I know there's a lot happening on the regulatory front to create more certainty. So maybe that's something that you can add some comments on.
Yes, I agree with you completely that uncertainty is the main challenge. However, it is maybe possible to mitigate or to work with these topics through analysis of certain project and looking for some possible options for mitigation the main risks. At the same time, from the beginning, working with hydrogen sector 3 years ago, I remember that we have targets for EU markets, not only for production, but also for import. It's interesting because we have a lot of discussions about hydrogen import. And on your opinion, is the EU hydrogen market ready for large-scale hydrogen import?
Right now, today, definitely not. I hate to say it, but if you look at the current import routes of energy, let's call it that, it's all oil and gas, of course. So, I mean, theoretically, if you were able to import that hydrogen through methane, then we would be ready. There's LNG terminals, there's all that, but importing green hydrogen through other carriers, of course, the most famous one being ammonia. We are ready to import green ammonia. However, if we want to use the hydrogen in it, we're not ready yet because there's no crackers. And from what I've heard, the only crackers that will come online will be somewhere around 28, 2030. So, but that's still very, very uncertain. And next to that, if the crackers were there, then you have the hydrogen in that industrial hub, which I think is already a great thing. But there's still no grid yet to transport the hydrogen, and a lot of projects are getting delayed there. But it's not all bad news. I know in Germany they've already started working, like actually digging up the ground and laying pipelines to get this hydrogen network, yeah, ready, the hydrogen backbone, basically. So there is a lot happening. But if you wanted to import green hydrogen today, you would have a pretty difficult time, I would think.
So, if I correctly understand, from technical perspective, it is possible to import maybe e-fuels that have the same
Yeah.
characteristics as current fossil fuels, or ammonia, like a mature market. But liquefied hydrogen, maybe it will be challenging, take into
Yeah.
account some.
Yeah, there are of course some demonstrator projects like the supply chain between Australia and Japan. I think it's called the Suso Frontier, where there is a ship already running back and forth. Yeah, transporting, unfortunately not green hydrogen, but at least liquid hydrogen from Australia to Japan.
Yes, but it's not in the EU.
No, exactly.
Yes, it's quite challenging, new technologies. So, uh, except the market, we have a lot of questions about certification standards for hydrogen. Um, I know that you worked a lot with this topic, with certification, and it's interesting to know about your opinion regarding how can producers confirm the compliance of hydrogen, how crucial RFNBO certification for accessing to the EU market. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think well, to start, you cannot enter the market without certification. As I just mentioned, the costs or the prices of gray and green or RFNBO are so far apart that you cannot enter the commodity market with your green hydrogen and expect to be competitive. You need some sort of the green premium, which has been talked about a lot. And the only way to access that green premium is by having certification and having the right proof that you have produced your hydrogen in a sustainable way, and therefore you count towards the target. So that's I think yeah, how do I say this? This is sort of a mentality shift that needs to happen in the project developers, but also in the traders, etc. It's no longer just a commodity that we're trading. It's not about the hydrogen. It's about how the hydrogen is used, how the hydrogen is produced. So in essence, these attributes that come with the hydrogen are more valuable than the hydrogen itself. So, for example, gray hydrogen might come at somewhere between 1 and 2 euros per kilogram. Green hydrogen or RFNBO hydrogen is more likely to be upwards of 7, 8 euros per kilogram. So there you can see that the hydrogen itself is maybe worth 2 euros, but then the certificate that comes with it is worth upwards 5, 6, 7 euros. So that's really why this certification is super important. And that's also what generates the value. And then on your point of how can they ensure they will be certified, that is by simply going through the exercise, by cross-checking all of the plans, all of the documentation, and making sure that it aligns with EU policy, essentially, or with the voluntary schemes. And that's something that I think developers can't do early enough. I think from the concept phase of your project, you need to already know which market you want to be serving. If that is Europe, you already need to have the whole RFNBO thinking in mind when designing your project, all the way from concept to pre-feed, feed, etc. And keep checking, because if you have your project built and suddenly you find out that you cannot comply, then you have a very expensive project that there is basically no market for. And what we also see is that banks and investors are already starting to ask for this proof. Same for off takers, to ensure that yeah, that they comply.
Well, it's not a simple process, if I correctly understand. So the developer should prepare a lot of documentation, management documentation for confirmation of all processes, if I correctly understand. It's a
Yeah,
real challenging topic, maybe for small companies.
correct. Yeah,
Uh,
I mean the methodology set out by the European Commission is very extensive and somewhat complicated to get through. There's a lot of clauses, a lot of things to keep in mind, which can be challenging to navigate, but not impossible to navigate for sure. And I think that's why it's important for these companies to get in touch with experts on these fields to help them through this process that have already done it before, because that can really speed it up quite a lot. And even though yes, it is quite some documentation on ensuring the PPA is compliant, ensuring the life cycle assessment, so the carbon footprint matches with the 70% reduction. That can be quite a complex exercise, but it's something that you can already do with quite a good level of certainty already early on in the project.
yeah, especially maybe some questions like mass balancing, if we consider some power-to-X technologies
Yep.
with different stocks, for instance. Yes, it's quite difficult maybe without managing these all questions from the beginning to ensure that it will be, this product will be certified without any
Yeah,
questions.
exactly. Yeah, and there's varying levels of complexity in these exercises, especially if you look at the carbon footprinting exercise. Um, like it can be as simple as you have an electrolyzer directly connected to a solar or wind park, and then it's relatively straightforward to do the exercise. But you can also have a completely integrated chemical plant where you add an electrolyzer that, for instance, adds hydrogen into some biorefining processes, and then you have bio streams and you have RFNBO streams, and you have power being consumed, steam being recycled within the plant, and then it becomes a lot more complicated to do the exercise.
Yeah,
And I think, especially in those cases, it's very advisable to get an expert on board.
yeah, that's true. We have a lot of variety of different feedstock that can be certified as RFNBO, and without experts, it's difficult to navigate all these requirements. But except certification, we have also requirements for standards, for instance, for sustainable aviation fuels and so on. Do you have some insights about this topic also?
Yeah. So, for instance, for sustainable aviation fuel, there's Corsia, um, which doesn't explicitly recognize e-fuels yet. It's more on SAF as a whole. So that's currently more targeted towards bio SAF, I would say. And yeah, globally, there's so if we zoom out away from Europe, there are a lot more schemes that you can think of. For instance, South Korea, Japan are developing their own incentives for low carbon hydrogen. In the US, the IRA was previously very promising. Of course, that is a bit more uncertain now with the current political landscape. But these are all, yeah, all under development, let's say. But currently, none of them are as advanced as the European scheme, and not as complicated as the European scheme. Many of them don't have a methodology yet, whereas the EU scheme has a full methodology that comes with it. And the way you can look at that as well is that the stricter the requirements, the higher the green premium will be. So that's why everybody is looking at Europe, because Europe is very strict in what they see as green hydrogen. So if you can comply with that, you should be going for that market, because that's where we expect the premiums to be the highest, essentially.
It will be good if we will have a lot of hydrogen from import. However, I heard that this complexity is also one of the challenge for producers, because they consider other markets like Asia and South Korea and some other places. And I think it's important to find some balance just to attract real good producers and companies with hydrogen, and at the same time to comply with all these targets for climate, for greenhouse gas emissions savings, and so on. So, except certification, you mentioned also that infrastructure is the main problem, and only Germany has some initiatives regarding pipelines and development of infrastructure. What infrastructure gaps are most urgent to address in current stage?
That really depends on the strategy that you want to employ. So if you want to have local production, so if you want to have a lot of production within the EU, then I would say the pipeline infrastructure might be more important to invest in. But we all know that that won't be enough. We also need imports. So from that perspective, having these industrial hubs, most likely in the ports, with ammonia crackers or other import terminals, are most important. So it really depends on the strategy that you want to employ. For instance, what we see now in the most successful project, or the most successful projects, I should say, is all of them are co-located. So all of them have their electrolyzer right next to the off-taker of the hydrogen. So whether that be a refinery, an ammonia production plant, a methanol production plant, all of them are currently co-located because there is no infrastructure. So those are the only projects that can go ahead. But if we want to, let's say, boost the imports, then it might make sense to go for these import terminals, crackers, etc. If we want to use hydrogen also as a means of reducing grid congestion, for instance, this is a very big issue in the Netherlands, where a lot of solar and wind parks can simply not be built anymore because there is no capacity for it. Then going for pipeline infrastructure might make sense. And of course, the combination of the two would be ideal, because then you have the flexibility to import and then to take it to whatever industrial cluster you want it to be. So I think that's the most important steps. So I think that's also the strategy of the TSOs, is to have these industrial clusters with import, and then pipelines between the clusters first, and then it can expand further.
So my understanding that from short-term perspective, we have decentralized approach where we produce hydrogen with near taker. However, later we expect some development of infrastructure and some progress in this topic. I think the most important question is a practical solution. So what are some practical steps companies should take when planning to enter the EU hydrogen market?
I think the most important one is to get educated, to ensure you understand the regulation, you understand how it will drive the demand. You understand the certification that you need to comply with, and you understand what the willingness to pay is of your clients. If you can get those right, then I think you can have a successful project. If you don't get those right, then you might end up in a situation where you're very far along in the development of your project. You think you're fully green, but you end up not being fully green, and also perhaps your costs are too high to comply. So I think ensuring you're educated, ensuring you know what's going on, I think that's the most important step, because in the end, the policy will drive the demand and will form the market. Without the policy, everybody will simply keep using fossil fuels because it's a lot cheaper, and nothing will happen. So you need to understand sort of how that whole chain of events will take place. So that's yeah, I think the most important practical step that anyone working in this industry can take.
I agree with the point. I think knowledge of key rules in regulation policy is important in order to schedule all steps in the project, in order to avoid delays, mistakes. We have so long permitted processes in the EU, and so for this reason we do not have time for learn through the mistakes. We need to plan activity for the project from the first steps, maybe according to the rules, in order to avoid this additional delays. However, except this regulation, I hear a lot of times that we have questions about off-takers. Do you have some insights how we can find new off-takers on the market in case of hydrogen?
Yeah. So I think, again, to find the off-takers, you have to start with the policy and then combine that with the technology to get your off-takers. This might sound very vague, but the place where the demand will come from is from the regulation that pushes the adoption. So you need to look at, okay, in which sectors is hydrogen being pushed, whether that be road transport, aviation, the maritime industry. There's regulations for all of these different sectors, and all of them will have different levels of willingness to pay, but also of demand. So that's sort of where you need to start, is all the way at the end of your chain. How will this hydrogen or this e-fuel or this RFNBO count towards the final target set in the regulation? And then you can start tracing it back through the different technology pathways, essentially to you as the producer. So if you want to serve the aviation market, then okay, SAF is perhaps the end goal. Then which pathway do you use? Is it Fischer-Tropsch or methanol to jet? And then you can sort of start tracing it back to your own project. And I think that's the way to find the off-takers, rather than trying to push it into the market.
So if consider all the questions that we discussed, maybe for companies, it will be useful to have some feasibility study with all steps for project, starting from targets, demand, infrastructure, and so on. And then they will see the full picture about certification and about possible takers, and maybe some solutions for this project.
Yeah.
Thank you for this very interesting discussion and useful for understanding the current stage of the hydrogen sector. And the last question, what advice would you give to companies trying to get access to the EU hydrogen market?
Well, get in touch with me. No, but yeah, as I said, get educated, employ some experts on the field, whether that be myself or you, Maryna, or anyone working in the field. I think it's important to have someone that really understands how this market works, because it's not a commodity market, and that makes it difficult to navigate. So someone that understands that picture, and adding them to your team is, I think, yeah, the best thing you can do to enter this market.
Thank you very much.